Be yourself. That's the motto for this episode. Be yourself. I'm going to give you my thoughts and reactions to the fourth episode of Tulsa King right after the jump. Hello, everyone. Terrence here with Hollywood Already Did It. If you haven't already, go ahead, like, share, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, ring that bell below. Anytime we have something, you will be among the first to know. So the fourth episode of Tulsa King is here. It's called The Visitation Place. This episode picks up at the end of the last one where Dwight is stalking Manny, who we know as Manny, for the proposed hit that he has taken out on Dwight. And Dwight catches him slipping while he's looking in the trunk of his car and holds him at gunpoint, takes him to his house, and starts asking him questions. And in that, he finds that Manny wasn't trying to kill him. Well, he was, but he was doing it because he thought he was sent there to kill him. We find out his real name is Armand, and he used to work for the same Capo and Pete and all those, and Chicky and all those folks. He thought Chicky sent him there, Dwight there to kill him, when in fact that is not the case. It just happens to be circumstance. What we learn is Armand left the family a long time ago, just out on his own because he didn't like some of the practices. He wanted to be out on his own, and he tried to warn Dwight while in prison about the hit that was being put on him by Pete. And Dwight's a little taken aback, but Pete apparently tried to take him out because they thought that there was no way in hell anybody would be willing to spend 25 years in prison without snitching or ratting. And Dwight's like, well, Pete did that? Okay, so he's a bit confused and taken aback. This also leads to why they probably sent him to Siberia and Tulsa. They don't know what Dwight knows. And when he does find out, they want to have at least enough time to get prepped before he comes back and rains hellfire down on them. Dwight and his crew, with Tyson and all of them, are now prepped to start selling nitro. Nitro tanks have arrived, and they're ready to start moving out to their next business opportunity. So they pick an event to do so, and they're selling like hotcakes. They're hand over fist. But then a biker gang comes and kind of tells them, like, hey, who told you could sell here? Like, who gave you permission to sell here? And they're like, nobody, we did. What you gonna do about it? To which they just leave. They don't do anything. They just leave. And they make money over fist. They take the money back to Dwight. They're like, hey, yo, this is a good spot. Dwight's like, cool. What's the next event? There's one tomorrow and the day after. Let's be there. Let's go get more tanks. Let's set up for that. Meanwhile, the biker gang goes back to their head boss, this is why this all comes together, who is the one who sort of gave the warning to his brother in the top of the last episode, the cold open. He's sort of the head boss of a lot of the crime that's been happening in Oklahoma, the wheat farms and all that stuff. The one who came in, seemed okay, and then they took away. It's him. He seems to be the head of all of this. He also seems to be the one that nobody plays with. They go back to him, tell him like what's going on. Like, hey, there was this people, they were selling stuff. We talked to them. They were like, what you gonna do about it? And then we left. We wanted to make sure that it was okay with you before we came back. And that seems like a big cry of weakness to them. There's this woman who's sort of gassing up him, the lead, and saying, hey, what are we gonna do about that? Weak link, get rid of them. So they beat the crap out of these folks. Before we get to the retaliation of that, there's a couple of side stories that are happening here. One of them is Stacy is just looking over Dwight's jacket and kind of just feeling about like, hey, I've made it, like, talking to her coworker, like, hey, I put myself out there before recently, didn't work out. So she's trying to like move on from Dwight. This whole episode is sort of about her trying to find that next path. She goes on a bar, and this tells you that Stacy is not very particular or got all her wits about her, but she's been drinking at home mostly for the most time. She goes back to the bar where the bartender knows her well. He's like, hey, regular, you do, and she has a one night stand with a gentleman named Colton. Now, she does her due, has a good time, but it seems like, I don't know, Colton comes out of nowhere. I don't know if there's an ulterior motive. We're going to find out that Colton had something, was watching her, who knows, but it seems a little too easy for her to just, her first time her night out. Granted, she's a beautiful woman, but her first night out to just get a drink and then move on. He spends time in her bathroom. Maybe there's a bug planet. Who knows? There seems to be something that was too easy for all of that to happen. That's her story. Dwight also has a side story about talking to his sister, Joanne. So he calls his sister out of the blue and just to say, hey, how's it going? And at that point, Joanne lets him know that Joe, their younger brother, has lymphoma and doesn't have much longer to live. And she said, I'll keep you posted on how that goes. Those two things are important. the Joe one specifically for the back end of this episode. When Manny is being held at gunpoint at the beginning, his wife does walk in and sees Dwight. She is sort of made aware of the situation and how Manny is Armand and how he's been lying to her for all these years. She kind of gets on the defensive and it's like, hey, what else did you lie to me about? You're a liar. I don't know if I can trust you. We need to move. We need to find a new home. This isn't safe. And she sort of takes the relationship by the balls. The inevitable happens. Dwight's crew returns to another event and tries to sell again. And this time Tyson and that whole crew is beat up. Biker gang beats them up. They return to Dwight to let them know what's going on. The tanks have been stolen, the money's been stolen, and they got beaten up. So they get on the defensive and say, what's our next plan of attack? They plan to, as you would say, strike back. The art of war, if you will. It's funny, Dwight keeps saying, like, oh no, we're not going to be violent, but they're going in there with bats and pipes and they're planning to be violent. While that is happening, Tyson, a couple of times, we see his home life with his father. First time, he was been given the pinky ring that Dwight has, and he's kind of just talking about life. And Mark's saying, hey, be careful. What are you doing? The only people who have pinky rings are British, I can't even say the word, but British dignitaries or mobsters. And he's not a British dignitary. So just be on the up and up. But they get really combative, and the subsequent sequences, he comes in and he's seen as he's gotten beaten up, and his dad does not take kind of that. Like, what are you doing? Like, we provided a good home for you. We asked you to go to college. We've done everything for you. Where's our return on investment? Because right now, all it seems like you're in trouble. You're getting into nothing but trouble. And Tyson doesn't want to hear any of that. He's like, whatever, cool. I'm done with it. And he goes to the room, the meeting place where Dwight is about to go and prepare to attack. Badface is there. He just happens to be in the world at that time. He's all about fighting somebody. He's like, yeah, cool. Thanks for bringing me into this. Tyson arrives to the sort of the hangout where they're about to go prep. Mark, Tyson's father, followed him, and he sort of confronts him. And in that moment, that's the first time that Dwight and Mark meet. Dwight's really just disrespectful at first. He does know he's his father pretty quickly, but he's still disrespectful to him. He's like, hey, yo, your son works for me. I'm his boss. And in that, Mark is like, hey, look, I'm going to come with you because if this is the crew that you're running to go do whatever it is to get revenge for my son, I want a part of this revenge just for beating up on my kid, but this team ain't going to be good enough, so I'm going with you. Enemy of my enemy is my friend. So he's brought into the fold. And it's a quick little moment. It's fun. But Dwight asks, like, hey, is he serious? And Mark's like, hey, don't talk to him. What do you think I'm serious? Are you a father? And in that point, he says, yes, I am. So then you know that I'm serious. Unfortunately, Dwight doesn't know. He doesn't really have that connection or know how much he's supposed to be in with his kid or do anything for his kid. He doesn't have the same connection with his kid that Dwight does, but he just kind of goes along with it. So they go and they attack. And it's this cool, what would you do for like the Rush Hour songs, what I always account it to, but that's played as they beat up on this entire team. Now, here's the thing. They beat these guys up. They're taking the biker gang out. Great. Mind you, Dwight specifically told the bartender that is at the place that purchased all the nitro, he can't come because he's on parole and I don't want you to get jammed up. So he tells him to stay back. So they go, they fight everybody, but it's easy. But that's because none of these folks know who this biker gang is under. They're just assuming the biker gang is the top, or they don't care and they're like, we'll worry about the ramifications later. But they don't know who's over him and the blowback that may come from this. But they go, they fight. You can tell that Dwight realizes about halfway through that he's a step slower than what used to be the thing that he would always go do this. He's not as mobile and as young as he used to be to make all of this work like the dime. The crew, Dwight, Mark, Tyson, all of those guys meet back at the bar and have a commiseration drink for celebratory. Mark is about to leave. He doesn't finish his beer, and he tells him, and Tyson seems to think that this is sort of like a bonding moment between him and his dad. And his dad is like, this isn't the bonding moment that you think it is. It's like, I'm leaving. I'm just here literally just to protect you or to get some type of payback for them hurting you. He tries to leave, and Dwight offers some money for his services, and Mark's not having it. And Mark just tells Tyson, whenever you're done or whatever happens, you've always got a home. Whenever you decide to get your shit together, you can come on home. And he leaves. Dwight also in that moment tells Manny, here's some money. And Manny's kind of like Armand. It's sort of like, hey, I owe you a debt. Because in this all, Dwight was like, hey, you're going to work for me now. Whenever I call you, you help me. Because you try to take over my life, that's going to be your debt. But in this, he says, I'm going to pay you some money. And Manny's like, hey, just add this to my, like, clear off my debt. He's like, no, those are apples. Those are two separate things. I'm going to give you money for this, but you still work for me. In that, this whole situation is sort of giving Armand Manny some of his balls back. Uh, and there was a whole sequence at the very beginning where his neighbor across the street kept putting dog poo in his lawn, and he would just take it. He wouldn't fight back. In this one, he goes back home after being out all night. His wife comes out and starts to try to bust his balls. But where have you been? Where have you been all night? And he steps in some of that dog poo. He's feeling himself now, folks. So he takes that shoe with the dog poo and goes over to that neighbor and just shoves it all up in his face and starts pounding on him. And he lets his wife know as he comes back in, we're not moving. We're going to be right here. Because he's now starting to feel good about his life. Probably going to come back and bite him in the ass. But it seems like, one, his wife, I believe, she doesn't make too much of a facial recognition about it, but it does feel like she's kind of like turned on a little bit. So, oh, he does have some balls. All right, cool. But they're not going anywhere. Joanne calls Dwight to let him know that Joe is about to pass. And he wants to talk to you. He can't speak, but he can squeeze my hand whenever it's something that he wants. I asked him, did you want me to call Dwight? And he squeezed my hand and said yes. So I'm calling him for you. So they have a conversation. And Dwight relays the story about when they were young and they were going to get some cookies or something like that. That they met a guy who had like white hair and long hair. Like he looks like what would be the quintessential God. They thought they was God. And Joe, when you were younger, you asked him, hey, are you God? And he squeezes Joanne's hand and says, yes, I remember the story. And he's like, look, if you see somebody like that now, go ahead and go with him. I think he's okay. And that was a rough, I've had a lot of loss recently. So that was a heartfelt moment. The moment you can kind of say, hey, it's okay to let go. You're in a lot of pain. It's okay to say goodbye. And then says that I'll see you down the line, and hangs up. And he definitely is saddened. We do see, and I kind of figured this would be the case. This is going to be how he sees Christina, because he's going to go to that funeral. And we see a bit of that in the clip for the next episode. But this all comes together. It all ends when Tyson picks up Dwight the next day. He seems to be running a little bit behind, and Dwight's like, did his father get to him? But he pulls up in his car. He gets in, and he says, yo, I think I'm going to change my hair color. Just some amber. And Dwight's like, all right, go for it. Be yourself. Like, that's it. I'm going to be myself. So in that, Dwight has kind of said, hey, you're with me. And Tyson said, I'm kind of shunning my dad, and this is where I want to be. I feel like, considering that they don't know who this person is, and the blowback comes back from after attacking this biker gang, things are about to get a lot worse and a lot hairier and a lot more dangerous. And it's going to be this thing where Dwight not being able to protect his daughter, not being able to be there for him, he's sort of treating Tyson a little bit like that father figure. Now that he's actually met Mark, his actual real father, I feel like he's going to be crushed if anything happens to that boy. And I feel like systematically, piece by piece, Manny to Tyson to Bohan, like all of these folks are going to start getting kind of in peril. And I don't know if, with him being gone, I don't know if the situation is going to go as well for them without Dwight being there. But I'm excited to see what happens next. This is a pretty cool episode. I think the biggest thing, the biggest takeaway is the Dwight, Mark, Tyson triangle that is sort of imploding. I think that Stacy is still on a spiral, but I think that spiral, someone has probably latched her on to Dwight, and now they're watching her. Since she already was sort of in trouble to begin with, I think somebody may have been watching her, and now they're seeing that she's with them. Who knows? But I'm really excited to see this next episode when he actually meets his daughter. I think it's going to be an emotional episode, and I think with him not being in Oklahoma, some of the ramifications of the businesses that he's doing and not being the heavy there, them not having a leader for a bit, could come back to bite them in the ass. So I think perfect setup episode for what we're going to get in the future. And I think the emotional beat that happens with him on the phone with Joe, it seems like every episode kind of ends or has like a comedy, some action, and then we have a little button of realism and heart that kind of happens at the end. I think the next episode will be the one that has that throughout because we're dealing with a funeral. But I like it. What did you guys think about this episode of Tulsa King called The Visitation Place? So leave your thoughts and comments in the comments below. If you haven't already, you can follow us on Twitter at HollywoodADI. You can hit us up on email at HollywoodAlreadyDidIt@gmail.com. We also have a podcast with the same name that's on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that plays podcasts. We're there. And like always, I got my ticket. You got yours.